When 13-year-old cheerleader Tristyn Bailey was found stabbed over 100 times, the world was shocked by her vicious murder. But when we found out her killer was himself only 14 and was her classmate and neighbor, it was even more shocking. How could someone so young be so dangerous? And how did no one see any warning signs? Let's get into it. Hi folks, and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Delaney and I'm a true crime writer and all-around murder nerd. On this channel, I like to talk about some of the worst cases, and I tend to cuss a lot. So if you're into that sort of thing, go ahead and subscribe. If not, that's cool. You do you. So now let's get back to the case of Tristyn Bailey. Tristyn was the youngest of 5 children, a 7th grader at Patriot Oaks Academy Middle School, and the co-captain of her award-winning cheerleading team. Tristyn lived with her family in the predominantly white, upper-class, private community of Durbin Crossing, a suburb of St. Augustine, Florida. It's in St. Johns County, which is one of the wealthiest counties in the entire country. The night before she went missing, she'd gone out to dinner with her family, and they didn't get home until about 11:45 p.m. Then around midnight, her older sister Sophia said she'd seen her in the garage video chatting with a guy. She couldn't really identify the guy, only that he appeared to be a white guy wearing a white ball cap. The next morning was Mother's Day, and Sophia and Tristyn had planned to make their mom, Stacy, a special breakfast. So Sophia got up and started prepping the meal. When 9:30 came and went and Tristyn didn't come down to help, she figured her sister was just sleeping in after being up so late. But when she went to Tristyn's room to wake her up, she discovered Tristyn wasn't there. She alerted their mom and they started searching around the house. They called Tristyn's phone, but it went straight to voicemail, and the location tracking on her phone had apparently been turned off. So at 10 a.m., Stacy called 911 to report her missing. Once the news got out that Tristyn was missing, the neighborhood immediately ditched their own Mother's Day plans and turned out to search for her. The Florida State Police also joined in on the search later that day. This was, after all, a wealthy white girl. Meanwhile, the local police were digging into where Tristyn had been that night and who she'd been with. Through her cell phone records, they learned that she'd received a phone call at 12:25 a.m. Then she must have snuck out of her house because surveillance footage from around the neighborhood showed her walking the streets at about 12:45. At about 1:15, she was spotted by another surveillance camera walking by the community center with what looked like a male. A half hour later, a neighbor's porch cam captured the pair walking east on Saddlestone Drive, which is a cul-de-sac near a wooded area. An hour and 45 minutes later, that same camera captured the other person sprinting back the other direction, carrying what looked like white shoes. A friend of Tristyn's, Trey Absher, was able to put the footage into context. He said that Tristyn had arrived at his house at about 12:30, hung out for about a half an hour, then left with another friend at about 1 a.m. That friend was also the person who had called her just before she left her house, Aiden Fucci. Aiden was a classmate of Tristyn's, 1 year older than her and an 8th grader at Patriot Oaks. And he was known to, as his classmates put it, have a lot of issues. They described him as numb, as in not having any feelings, but he also had a hair trigger and would snap easily. They made special mention of his eyes, which they said were glassy and had no feeling in them. And I have to agree. His 2 best friends said he had some pretty heavy mental issues, like hearing voices telling him he was no good. He told them he hated himself and wanted to commit suicide. Classmates said he was obsessed with death and killing and would talk about it all the time. They said he would frequently draw pictures of mutilated bodies. One classmate told the police, "He's the type of person you would see as a murderer. He just doesn't care." Some of his friends said they thought all his behaviors were just a coping mechanism for his shitty home life. So, for context, Aiden's mom and dad, Crystal and Jason, were divorced, and Crystal had remarried. Aiden lived with his mom and stepdad, but was using his step-uncle's address in order to attend Patriot Oaks, which is actually fraud, but apparently that only applies to poor people. One friend said Aiden had confided in them that his mother was mean to him and would tell him she didn't want him and that he was just a disappointment. His dad was even worse. He'd been arrested for child abuse, battery, and lewd and lascivious acts with a minor. Aiden said his dad was physically abusive towards him and wouldn't allow him to express any emotions. According to his classmates, Aiden had started drinking at a young age because his dad would have parties and leave the booze just laying around the house so Aiden could get into it. They also said that Aiden would brag that his dad would have lots of women over and that he and his dad would both be having sex with them. Aiden also liked to collect knives and would bring them to school a lot. He had two favorites, a folding buck knife with a skull on it that his stepdad had given him, which he called Picker, and a yellow or gold folding knife with a wood handle that he called Poker. He told multiple classmates that he wanted to kill someone, specifically by stabbing them, and he would act out stabbing motions like he was practicing. His girlfriend said that he'd threatened to kill her, and on more than one occasion, he'd sneak up behind her and pretend to slit her throat with his knife. She told police that he said he wanted to kill a random person, drag them off into the woods, and stab them to death. He told her that he was going to do it soon, within a month. So, since Aiden was the last person to see Tristyn, sheriff's deputies interviewed him. At this point, it was still Mother's Day, and Tristyn hadn't been found. While he and Trey were in the back of the squad car for questioning, he posted a video.
In a fucking cop car.
Yep. Tristyn.
What's up, guys?
Yep.
Tristyn, if you fucking walk out the damn...
When you see this in a month...
Fucking assault rifle on this bitch.
Oh my god.
God damn, dude has fucking like flashbangs and shit back there. It's in a fucking cop car, cuz. Tripping, dude.
It was during Trey's questioning that the carefully manicured image of this wealthy, lily-white suburb was shattered. Trey said that he'd been having a party at his house that night while his parents were gone, something that apparently happened a lot. There was drinking and smoking weed, like you'd expect at a party. Not exactly wholesome, but not really too out of the ordinary yet. Then police asked him if anyone might want to hurt Tristyn or was mad at her. He told them that Aiden was, quote, jealous of her, even though Aiden had a girlfriend. According to Trey, he and Tristyn had been having sex. One time, Trey secretly FaceTimed Aiden while they were in the act. Apparently, Aiden had recorded it and was using that video to extort her somehow. Anyway, back to Aiden. He told police that after he and Tristyn had left Trey's house, they'd walked up North Durbin Parkway together, but then she'd turned down a different street to go to her house, and he'd continued on to his house alone, where he arrived between 3 and 3:30 a.m. But that timeline didn't make sense. Aiden's house was less than a mile and a half from Trey's house, a trip that would have taken less than 30 minutes on foot. So when questioned about the almost 2-hour discrepancy, he changed his story. He said that she'd grabbed his junk, and so he pushed her down and she'd hit her head. After that, he said he'd just walked around by himself for a while to clear his head before going home. He also suggested that Tristyn might be at her drug dealer's house, a 22-year-old named Carlo. Police questioned Carlo, and he was quickly cleared as a suspect in Tristyn's disappearance. The fact that he was selling drugs to middle schoolers, not sure what happened with that. Anyway, the fact that Aiden was the last person who'd been with her and him changing his story, this was all highly suspicious, so he was arrested. While he was in the back of the squad car, Aiden posted this photo to Snapchat. Around 6 p.m., they got their answer. A jogger spotted Tristyn's body in a wooded area near Saddlestone Drive, only about a quarter mile from Aiden's house. She was fully clothed, and a few of her belongings were scattered around her. She had been stabbed numerous times. The medical examiner would find 114 separate stab wounds, including nearly 50 to her hands and arms, indicating that she'd tried to fight off her attacker. The attack had been so vicious, the tip of the knife had broken off in her scalp. A search of the area revealed a buck knife with a broken off tip in a nearby retention pond. Aiden's classmates would identify that knife as the one Aiden called Picker. So police picked up Aiden's parents and brought them into an interrogation room with him. Crystal ordered Aiden not to answer any questions or say anything until their lawyer arrived, which is their right. But once they were left alone in the interrogation room, which is being recorded, Crystal started questioning him herself. She asked him what he'd been wearing that night, and he said he was wearing jeans. She then corrects him, saying he was wearing khakis that night. She then asked if there would be anything on them, and you can just barely hear her whisper, "Blood." Meanwhile, investigators searched Aiden's home. In his room, they found a buck knife sheath, but not the knife that it went to. There were also some of Aiden's drawings, images of bloody women with their arms chopped off and big X's carved onto their breasts. Investigators also found a pair of white Nike shoes and a t-shirt, both of which had human blood on them. That blood would later be confirmed to be Tristyn's. Also, there was a pair of wet blue jeans and a laundry basket in his room, as well as some blood and dirt on the drain in the bathroom sink next to his bedroom. The investigators also seized surveillance footage from the home, which not only had cameras facing outside, but inside as well. The porch cam showed Aiden entering the front door at 3 a.m., holding that white pair of Nikes. But also, interestingly, the interior surveillance footage showed Crystal going into Aiden's room after he'd been picked up for questioning. She's shown taking a pair of jeans, and only those jeans, out of his room and then scrubbing them in the sink, that sink where the blood and dirt were found. She then takes the jeans downstairs and puts them in the master bedroom for a while. Apparently, those wet jeans dripped on the floor because her husband is shown cleaning up the floor where she'd just walked. Later, she's shown with her husband holding the jeans up and looking them over before returning them to the hamper in Aiden's room. Aiden was charged with first-degree murder. Since he was only 14 when he committed the crime, he couldn't receive the death penalty, even though he was being charged as an adult. He pled not guilty. His mom was charged with evidence tampering, a felony punishable by up to 5 years in jail and a fine of $5,000. As of the time I'm filming this, she's still awaiting trial. While he was awaiting trial, Aiden was kept in a juvenile facility. While he was there, he kept attacking the other inmates, bullying them, and extorting them for their commissary items. And when the guards confiscated those items from him, Aiden threatened to kill their families. He had to be put in restraints several times and spent most of his time in solitary. His trial was supposed to start on Monday, February 6th, 2023, but at the last minute, literally as they were about to start selecting the jury, Aiden changed his plea to guilty. He made one brief statement apologizing to the Bailey family and his family. His sentencing hearing hasn't been set yet, but he's facing a mandatory minimum of 40 years. But again, because he's a minor, his sentence will come up for review in 25 years. So this case reminded me a lot of another similar case from back in the 80s, the Acid King, Ricky Casso. There were a lot of similarities, so I'm going to cover that case in my next video. So stay tuned for that one. What are your thoughts on this case? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe for more terrible stories like this one. Till next time, Darklings.